Now, I'm really, really excited to introduce you to our speakers, but I think that they might do a better job of explaining who each of them are. So we are going to speak today with some amazing, amazing people. I'm going to invite them all to turn their cameras on, and then we can go through and kick off introductions. So let's see here who we got. All right, so Lacey, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Hi all, my name is Lacey Liu Wright, she, her. I'm the Executive Director of Hillman Grad's Foundation. And with that, I help oversee the company's programs that help really expand pathways for emerging creatives. We have a mentorship lab that supports emerging actors, writers, creative execs, and another program that supports emerging directors. And for us as a company that's so well known for working with first-time writers and directors, it's important for us to kind of help continue and create these pipelines. So thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, so happy to have you. You're bringing some great energy. I cannot wait. Naomi, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yes, always hard to follow Lacey, but I'm Naomi Funabashi. I'm our head of film and TV. I oversee scripted, unscripted, features, work with Rishi on the publishing side. We're getting into podcasts and theaters, all that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Excellent. Thank you, Naomi, for coming. Travis, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Travis Ng. I also work with Naomi in the film and TV division of Hillman Grad.
Very cool. And Rishi, to round us out, what should our audience know about you today?
Hello, I'm Rishi. I am the CEO of Hillman Grad and oversee all of our various divisions across film and television, and our record label under Def Jam, and our publishing imprint under Zando, our future fashion line, our future consumer packaged goods and branded content divisions as we kind of build out a fully robust media company. And I have had the pleasure and honor of working with Lena over the past 4 years building out this company.
That is so, so cool. Y'all have some big stuff in the works. So I cannot wait to dive in on today's topic. Now, y'all are here to talk to us, about Hillman Grad, about, this amazing org that you all work in and support. Now, I know that you've each kind of touched on like what y'all do for the different your different roles at the org, but could you all give us maybe a glimpse into what drew you to working with Hillman Grad? Naomi, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I definitely grew up not knowing that you could have a job in entertainment. I love stories and storytelling. For me, especially as the kid of 2 immigrant parents from China and Japan, respectively, stories were how I understood the world around me and how I related to people around me. And it was, as much as I love them, I always wish that there is a way for me to see myself more and the people that I knew and loved more in those stories. And so, fast forward a couple decades, when Lena sort of came to the scene and was doing what she was doing, she very much was a lighthouse for me personally in terms of what she fought for and also representing this wave of change in Hollywood. And she and Rishi building this empire together, like honestly, that was like a campfire I just wanted to sit by. So when the first opportunity came to join, I just jumped at it. And yeah, I'm just loving the ride and so happy to be working with this incredible team.
Oh, great to hear this. Travis, how about you?
I think a lot of what Naomi said, it certainly resonates with all of us here, where we so believe in the mission of being able to express all these stories that we never got to see when we were kids. And, like every industry, Hollywood, everyone knows how to talk the talk, and everyone is really great talking the talk. But what Hillman Grad does so well is we actually walk the walk, even when it's an uphill battle, and even when it's a much more arduous path, but it's also the more fulfilling path. That's ideally what we all strive for here as well.
Oh, it's incredibly true. Now, obviously, Lacey and Rishi, your take on this is going to be a little bit different. But what do you think really drew you to starting a company like this, to trying to establish this powerhouse? Rishi, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, sort of the honest answer is that I had a lot of frustration with kind of the way Hollywood was functioning, especially in this quote unquote diversity renaissance that still managed to somehow portray all of us as incredibly monolithic.
Yeah.
And, Lena was such a representation of not that. And, when I had the opportunity to interview to come start Hillman Grad with Lena, a lot of what we talked about was really fundamentally the idea that not every person of color is the same, not every queer person is the same, not every disabled person is the same, and that it's on us to make sure that stories of people from all walks of life are represented in a very real way. And Lena's also just a total badass, and she was like, very much like sort of inspired me. She always talks about showing your teeth and being able to like walk into a room with purpose and intention, and making sure that you're there to fight, and you're there to fight because Travis talked about an uphill battle, and we get told no all the time on these stories, even with sort of like the level that we've reached at Hillman Grad, even with the amount that we're putting out into the world. And so to be at a place where we're really, it's about fighting for these stories to get made and told, and also reaching back to pull people into the room with us. Like those two kind of fundamental areas are what I think Lena has put so much of her career on, and was really inspired me in a way to kind of be that person and that presence for all the artists that we work with.
Oh my God, you're hitting me right in the feels here with the idea that, not only is it important to kind of elevate and share amazing creators from such a very diverse diaspora as AAPI. Not only is it important to do that, but like I love what you said about pulling other people into the room with you, right? It's important to be first. It's also just as important, if not more so, to not be the last. So Lacey, how about you? You are the exec director. What really drew you, to Hillman Grad?
Of course. Well, it's hard to follow Rishi, but I saw everything he said and I saw that mission in the company. I've been working in diversity and inclusion and equity in entertainment for a hot second. And I know of so many great programs, but that are really trying to take companies to diversify them or to expand inclusion. And I don't have to do that at Hillman Grad. It's exactly who they are and how they've been. And to also have a program that I get to run, but with the full support of the entire company, because they're just as dedicated to this mission as I am. And I think it's something unparalleled and something I hadn't found in any workplace before this.
Wonderful to hear. And honestly, it's echoing a lot of the same things, like a lot of the same reasons I love Power to Fly. And I can't tell you how happy it makes me to hear story after story after story of like, we're not a unicorn company. There are other orgs out there that are, striving to make these changes, that really believe in the mission. It's one of the things we say here, the mission is the metric. If we're not supporting that mission, then what are we doing? And, that sounds key to what y'all are doing as well. If it doesn't align with your values, why are you pursuing it? One of the things that I actually wanted to touch on, because I thought this was a really good question and I didn't have to think very long, but I do know that other people probably would. Can we talk a little bit about, some of your favorite characters from film and television? I know I've had at least 3 conversations today that talked about representation, especially in the media. My personal favorite is like the entire family from Kim's Convenience. It's, oh my God, y'all, it's like a balm to the soul. It's just, they're so lovely and nice. And there's like some really like tear-jerking moments in it. So that's mine. Who would like to share what their favorite AAPI character is, from film or television? Is there one that really has touched you or that really stuck with you? Travis, how about you?
I'm going to bend the rules of the question a little bit. So he's a character from film and from TV, not a fictional character. And it's Yul Kwan from Survivor, season 13, Cook Islands, which I believe aired in 2006.
The fact that the air date is like, it tells me everything. You're a super fan.
Oh yeah, and if you haven't watched Survivor, this is actually a great, very controversial, but a great season to start with. But he is somewhat of a legendary figure in Survivor, but really elevated the game, brought a new level of sophistication to it, and Survivor was never the same after it. And he is, I think, for a lot of Survivor fans, one of the most iconic in the way that he played the game with sophistication, but also class and character, and at a very human level was a very respectable yet skilled player of the game that made the show something different in the succeeding years, but it's still on today.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I remember the first season of Survivor. I remember hearing about it and thinking, why would you ever go to why would you pay to go do this? But, it really, I think by season 6, people had understood the game of it more, right? It was less about like the teamwork and all that kind of stuff, but more about kind of being cagey and like knowing how to play it, as well as having like the skill and the stamina to endure. So yeah, thank you. I think that's a really great example. Rishi, would you like to go next?
Yeah. I first and foremost, I think just like massive shout out to the entire cast of Everything Everywhere All at Once, because holy shit, like really felt very, very seen and was just completely delighted by that film. But there's another character that I would love to highlight that is maybe a little bit of a weird choice. But in Michaela Cole's I May Destroy You, there is a brown character named Zane, and not to like create any spoilers, but he does something pretty fucked up. Like he does something really, really, really like not okay, and but is still sort of this dynamic, layered brown man who makes mistakes and is also young and charming and intelligent and attractive, and is a complicated person. And I think for me, it's really important to not just be putting characters out on the screen just as like, completely perfect hero figures always too, and that we can have really messy, multi-dimensional Asian characters as well. And I think it's a little bit weird for me to say that I resonated with this character more than I resonated with a brown character on screen ever. But I did, because he felt like a human being. And I mean, I think that is so much what Michaela Cole's brilliance was throughout the series, but I want more of that.
Oh, I mean, honestly, this is so true, right? Like we don't necessarily decide what things really like resonate with us, right? Like what stories kind of, you hear them and part of it sticks with you and it doesn't leave, and it might be months or years before you think of it again, but like when it happens, you're right back there, right? It's those kind of stories and those kind of people that really like hang in there. And I mean, it's just wonderful. And you're right, like, seeing examples of yourself or seeing people that look like you is great. And we want to try and portray people in a positive light, but it's the messy characters that are the best, right? Like it really digs in, and it stops being kind of like an unreachable goal, or maybe I can like you see it more and more with like superhero movies lately, especially, and I am here for it. Like, yes, you can do amazing, incredible things. Are you still a mess on the inside? Yes, and that's okay. Like, we're all messes. Lacey, how about you? Has there been a character that's really stuck with you like that? Something that's really, really stood out for you?
My favorite Asian American character is one I feel like most people don't realize is Asian American, but it's Russell from Up. I don't know.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
I don't know if you can tell, but he kind of reminds me of what I was like as a child. It was like just deeply loving, but also constant chaotic energy at all times. And now that I have a little nephew who's running around and also is like making stop motion little movies himself, also kind of reminds me of him. And it's just so cute. And for me, it was one, I just haven't seen mainstream depictions of like little Asian happy children like that anywhere. And also even the fact that he had like slanted almond eyes, because I grew up in a place where we would all talk as children of like when we got older, what surgeries we were going to get to change the way that we looked and to change our eyes. So to see just like a happy, cute little character with our features was mind-blowing to me. And it's still a movie I watch when I'm sad.
Isn't it wonderful? Like, if you can get past the first like 5 minutes and you're okay with your ugly cry that's going to happen in those first 5 minutes, the rest of the movie is glorious. Like, if you can't do it, I totally understand. I too have like sped through those parts of Disney movies where it gets real intense and you're like, no, I just wanted the happy colors. I wanted, a nice story. That's what I wanted. No, that's wonderful. And you're right. Like, it is really great to see people like that, especially where your like their ethnicity or, whatever is not the focus. It's not the reason they're in the story. It's not the central point that involves them with the story or with other characters. I love that. Naomi, how about you?
Well, two things come to mind. One of which I was almost like, oh, is it going to feel like I'm tooting our own horn? Because but I will say, like, our movie Chink and Dunk, which I can say because it was in the works long before I ever came here. I was a fan from the beginning, and I continue to be a fan. But some of the characters and their journeys in that movie, honestly, like, I cried, I laughed, I felt like I had just never felt as seen and represented before. But outside of that, I will also say, justice for Rose Tico. I mean, I loved Star Wars so much, like more than anything ever growing up, and had never gotten to see myself in that universe. And when Last Jedi opened with with Paige Tico being this war hero, I was like, that, like, I did not expect to have that scene. Like, that alone just like shook me, like started like tearing up in the theater, and then feeling like, oh, we're gonna get the story of her sister and like their relationship and what it means for her to be in this universe as well. So anyway, not to like stir the pot from things that people have been fighting about for the last 3-4 years. But that one,
stir it. That girl, she got did dirty by some of those.
I know.
Like, let's talk about some gatekeeping. All right, that's ridiculous. No, her role
never had
awesome.
More fights with people than over Last Jedi and Rose Tico. But anyway.
Oh my God, sorry. Between that and Ghostbusters, it's like, God, can you just calm down? Like, it'll be fine. Yeah. You've got 900 other movies with a bunch of dudes in it. It's okay. Apologies, Travis and Rishi, but you know what I'm talking about. So, okay. So let's kind of keep moving in the same vein here. Rishi, you as CEO, you really ensure that Hillman Grad furthers that mission like we talked about earlier. Can you talk to us a little bit about, like, what the mission, exactly is, and maybe some examples of how Hillman Grad is achieving or working towards that mission?
Yeah, I think ultimately the goal of the company is to have storytelling exist and be put out into the world that is representative of the world that we live in. And that is fundamentally at its core. And what that means is looking at the reflection of stories across the spectrum of race and sexuality and financial status and geographic location and disability and age and all the other sort of stories that don't ever get told and don't ever get kind of a light shined on them, and being able to make sure that we are facilitating those creators to be able to actually make those stories. That is the mission. That is also really, really hard in a context where we're constantly given excuses about stories feeling too small, too niche. There's not enough audience for it. It's too expensive for the amount of people that could possibly actually watch it. All the reasons that people have been given in Hollywood for forever. But one of the biggest things that we come across is the idea of a lack of access to the business, and also a lack of awareness and education about the business. And so what we have been trying to do, and this is where I think, where a lot of Lacey's work is so integral to the overall mission of the company, is that, Lena and I talk a lot about the barriers to entry that exist in the industry. And there are so many barriers to entry, but I didn't know that producing was a job I could do when I was growing up. And I think that's like a pretty fundamental thing for a lot of people. A lot of people don't know that there really are jobs that exist between, beyond being an actor or being a director or being a writer, and that you can be a choreographer or a production designer. You can be a really great line producer or a production secretary. Like, there are tons and tons of jobs on set, and so many of those are jobs that are kept to very specific communities and very specific groups that have done those jobs for a very long time. So for us, it's all about sort of making sure that we're creating programs that bring people into the business, create access, create education, create opportunities, build support systems around individuals, and then be supporting them beyond those programs. And so it's, for example, we have the Indeed Rising Voices program, where we're sponsoring, 10 directors to make 10 short films that can be their calling card to break into the business and industry. And it's been incredible, and Indeed have been amazing partners in it. But what we do, which is unlike what any other program does, is pay the artists, make sure they have a real budget, $100,000 to make a real short film, that they have support and mentorship all the way through the process. When they get out of the program, to be able to have continued support and mentorship. And so that we're helping usher them into getting representation, helping usher them into getting their first episode TV direct, helping usher them into getting their first feature film finance. And we have to do that because we talk about breaking new voices into the business, but basically no one's going to let us hire a quote unquote, young or inexperienced director unless they have something to show. And so we're basically taking away all of the excuses that individuals have that are the gatekeepers in Hollywood by continuing to show them excellence across the work that we're doing and continuing to support artists in breaking through those barriers.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea of, like you said, not only, opening those doors. I mean, there was a quote from, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember it. Ellen Pompeo, I want to say, several years ago, that was talking about, yeah, it's all great to have like things like the Me Too movement and, trying to get more women in front of the camera, but let's also look at who's behind the camera, who is outside of the spotlight. Is there true diversity and representation there? Do you have voices in the room that understand what it's like, that represent your audience? Yeah, I mean, it's very awesome to hear that, you don't just kind of gear them all up and then send them off into the world and hope for the best. It's really nice to know that there's not quite like kind of the mama bird approach, but yeah, I think that's amazing. And, you make a really good point, right, about the gatekeeping that goes on about, I mean, it's kind of the same everywhere, but it's a lot of that, like, you need 4 years experience to get that entry level job or get that first job out of college. And I think, it's obviously even more so when it comes to something like directing. Now, do you think about, when you're telling these stories or when you're bringing people into the program, are you focusing mostly on people with diverse perspectives that are also telling diverse stories, or is it not required to like only be focusing on, Pacific Islanders in your work? Like, are you taking on people that want to do all kinds of projects?
Absolutely. I think it's also super important to us. I think white people have been telling stories about people that look like us for forever. So,
oh God, guys, we're the worst. Like, truly.
So we should also be able to tell stories about white people if we want to, although, I think we prefer a little bit more representation across there. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is that just because you come from a specific cultural background does not mean that you need to make a small indie relationship drama or an immigrant movie or arranged marriage piece. Like, yes. You go make a kick-ass like sci-fi movie if you want to, or go make a great horror film that is not, necessarily just a reflection of your cultural background. It's like those are incredibly important to us, and we want people to be able to tell the stories that they're passionate about telling. Yes. Basically, we just want to be like the wealthy, well-connected Hollywood parents that we never had to the next generation.
Heck yes. Oh, I support this. I'm here for it. I love it. And you bring up a really good point. Like you said, it's just like the stories that are being told are just as important as the people doing the telling. It kind of reminds me of, oh God, I'm not going to remember the quote, but it's something about, until the lion tells the story, the hero will always be the hunter. And it really highlights the point that, like, the perspective and the point of view and who is telling the story is incredibly important. Truly, like, changes the entire thing. And so I think that's a really good point to make, is that, like, just because you come from a certain background does not mean you have to tick all the boxes of like, yes, I made an immigrant film. Yes, I made a culture clash film. No, I touched on this subject there. Like, you're right. That's incredibly limiting in a lot of ways, because it's like, well, yeah, this might be something you have a window into, but if that's not your jam, it's not your responsibility to keep doing that. Like, people are creatives for a reason, because they need that leeway. They need to express themselves. They need to do that in whatever way feels best for them. All right, let's shift gears a little bit here. Lacey, I know that you oversee Hillman Grad's Mentorship Lab. So talk to us a little bit about that. I'm really interested to hear, like, what it really takes to be a good mentor in entertainment. I think obviously this changes drastically industry to industry. I get to listen to people talk about stuff like this all the time. So I want to know from you, what do you think it takes to be a good entertainment mentor?
Thank you so much. Well, we have a mentorship lab that has 3 tracks in it, one for actors, one for writers, and one for creative execs. And it's a few things. We have 3 full-time instructors who help teach these programs, and they're also working creatives in their own right. So they're learning from people who are active in the business at this moment. But what's important is not just what we have to offer them, but also I think we have just as much to learn from them. I think film and TV is such a collaborative medium. It has to be. Anyone who says they've made it all on their own is lying to you. And even I think I can speak to everyone who's on this call now is we didn't make it alone. We had people who believed in us and invested in us and brought out the best in us. And that's what we hope to do with all of our mentees as well. But also, our program specifically for folks of color and really like queer folks of color, very specifically when there's very few spaces for those types of creatives. And for us, it's important to have a level of mentorship that understands their lived experiences, the ones that we share with them, but also the ones that we don't. And I think at the end of the day, they have as much to teach us as we have to teach them. And I think that's the core of being a good mentor, is understanding that relationship. But even as much as Rishi's saying, like, we want to be like the rich, entertainment parents they didn't get, and as much as that part of it is what it is, this is also about them finding mentorship amongst each other. We also really strictly build a cohort. So even though there's 3 tracks, they're all required to work together. The writers have to help out the actors and what they're going to do. The creative execs are giving notes to the writers. It's such a fully collaborative process between all of them, because who they'll gain most from is not necessarily the folks above like us, but it's each other, and they'll rise up together. And building that community, that cohort is the core of everything.
Oh God, yes. Especially, when it comes to things like entertainment, especially out in Hollywood, relationships are everything. Who you know is everything. And so I love this idea that not only are you elevating and giving and resourcing these people so that they can break into that space, but you're completely driving home the fact that nobody does this alone. Like, there are very, 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 very few jobs that are truly siloed. And that, so I love that you're not only introducing them to that teamwork aspect, but you're building a community of people who all have, kind of this like locus point in common. And so not only are you, kind of boosting the types of people that you want to see more from in the industry, but you're helping them build that network that, this is how you get to a group of people who are the rich connected parents, it's by making these connections and sharing them with more people. Like, I think I said it on our last chat, but like, it's just as important to be the first as it is to not be the last. Like, don't be the last person that of your intersectionality that was in that room, bring people along with you. I'm loving all of this, y'all. This is great. Naomi, I want to talk to you for a minute here. Your love of storytelling clearly drives your work at Hillman Grad. For those in the audience who want to share their stories, what do you think makes a story compelling?
Yeah, a couple of things. I always say, you should tell a story that only you could tell, that feels really personal to you. I think a lot of times, especially younger writers, I see this, or like greener writers, I see this where they think that Hollywood wants a certain type of story, or they want to emulate a big success that just happened. And I just say, like, start with what's meaningful to you. And, to sort of tie it back to what Rich was saying earlier, like that may or may not be specific to your identity and to what degree that is what your piece is about, right? I do think like it's really important for all of us to have the freedom to bring that in as much as we feel like reflects what we want to say about it. Because like, do I spend every second of my waking life just being an Asian person? Like, in some ways, yes, in that I am Asian. So everything I do as an Asian person, but it's not like my whole life is not built around this one piece and nothing else in terms of who I am. So, I just think that we always say like, the more specific you are, the more universal you are, which I think is really true. It's the details that make someone able to see, oh, this is how we actually are related to one another and how I can understand your story. So I think those things are super important. But yeah, right from the heart, I think like the important thing is, if you're worried about, okay, but like, what sells, or like what minefields do I have to avoid, or things like that, in an ideal world, will you find a good producing partner? It's their job to sort of understand your vision and help you navigate those things. But don't be the person preemptively cutting your story off or changing what you want to see in the world because you're trying to appease sort of like a shadowy figure behind a curtain.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So incredibly important. Real quick, we did get a question in the chat. And so I want to go back to Lacey before we continue. This person had asked what should you look for, people that are not able to partake in your program, what should people look for if they're trying to find a good entertainment mentor? Now, I've heard this answer be given for a lot of different industries, but never for entertainment. So I'm really, really interested to know, what do you think is are there like a top 3 of like, they have to have this, or like, if they have that, run screaming. What do you look for when it comes to mentorship?
Oh God, that's a hard one. I think for me, the people that I find that I invest in and that I love are the people that are constantly curious and want to learn. And I love the people that come in with that energy. I found so many mentors, both of myself, but also found folks that I've mentored from everything from the professional spaces to online to truly there's an entire half of my community is in the Vietnamese American community just because I found a random Viet and entertainment Facebook group and we just became friends like that. And as much as I've asked of my community to help and support me, it's also how much I've tried to offer them. Even before I was anyone, before I had anything to offer, I was like, hi, I can help out, I'll volunteer. And I think Lena's the ultimate example of that. Even before she was a big name, before, she was the famous writer that she was doing coffee Saturdays and said, come roll up, bring your script, I'll give you 15 minutes of my time. And I think that level of exchange, again, is the core of everything.
Oh yeah. I mean, you talk about kind of building that relationship. And, it really is like sometimes you will find somebody that can give you the resources that you want or that you need, talk to you, spend their time, whatever. But like, if you're building those relationships, you might be the person that someone else is looking for, or you might be the person that connects to people that would be absolutely perfect for that relationship. So I love that idea of like kind of looking in, don't just look in like kind of the expected places, but also like think about it in terms of relationship building as opposed to, kind of transactional. Naomi, we got a really good comment in the thread here, especially regarding what you had said about, that being Chinese or being a Chinese American is something that's true about you, but it's not like the entirety of you. There's a lot of people that is resonating with in the thread. I mean, from my own lived experience, like I'm bipolar. That is my lived experience. It's a big factor in my life, but it's not the core. It's not the entirety of me. It's not everything. And I think that's something that is important for people to remember because like, you don't get to pick where you're born. You don't get to pick who raises you. You don't like, there's so much of this that is strictly out of our control and not something that people choose or don't choose. And so it is really important to think of these things in terms of, yes, they're important, but also to not raise them to the level of that is who this person is, and it sounds like you guys do a really great job of finding these people that want to tell these very nuanced stories. It just sounds amazing. Naomi, did you have anything to add before we keep moving?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I don't want to keep saying, I feel like I've said too much about
please. Y'all, I get paid to fill the silence. Do not let me over time here. Truly, like it could honestly be in my job description. Like, please feel free to interrupt me. Okay.
No, I think I'll just say one last thing, which is I'm really paraphrasing something Rishi always says, but it's like, we just want to see ourselves in all the different roles that I think other people have gotten to be in, for years and years. And that means in all of its entirety. I think like something I also talk about on the flip side is like not wanting to do the plastic representation thing, right? Where like, there's nothing that reflects any specificity of identity. And it's just like, oh, we just happen to cast a person of color and then we do nothing to the script and it's fine. And I also feel like you don't want to be in a place where you're completely erasing things that are very important to who someone is, but it's all about, navigating that spectrum and with intentionality and thoughtfulness and for what, the creator wants to do, for what the vision is, for what thematically you want to tackle with the story. And I think it's that attention to thoughtfulness that is so important, but also I think the goal for all of us is as we have more and more opportunity to see ourselves on the screen, we naturally with that have more opportunities to demonstrate that spectrum. And so that's I think the long-term goal we're all working for together, and hopefully we'll get there one day.
I mean, fingers crossed, right? Every day we get a little bit closer, every drip makes a puddle. Gen Z is going to save the world. I cannot wait to see it and support it. Like truly loving this. Travis, I want to talk to you a bit about your role. Now you're a development executive, and you get to see kind of the trends in what creators are making, what they're pitching, what they're working on. Now, without giving anything away, obviously, what can we expect to see that is representative of the AAPI experience coming out of the industry in the next couple of years?
It's a good question. And I think I'm probably going to sort of hit on a lot of themes that we've talked about, which is, like over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of film and TV kind of about like overcoming difference or like, these like against all odd triumphs against like great adversity or like succeeding in majority dominated spaces. And those stories are really important, right? They're really important because they need to be told. They also need to spread empathy and understanding amongst those who are like unaware or unwilling to approach these stories. But I think what comes with that too is that these characters often have to represent entire groups, right? They have to be like flawless or like unimpeachable or like paragons of excellence and tenacity, or
minority thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
like exemplify some form of ideal. And the thing we talk about all the time is that like other communities are not monolithic, right? Is that diversity means diversity within every community. And we want to be able to pick minority communities with just as much heterogeneity and individuality as the next, which means like these characters are free not only to be exceptional and virtuous and triumphant, but also to be like flawed and uncertain and failed and like kind of shitty, you know, like the same as what Risha was speaking to with the character described. And you know, to contain contradictory notions, to be sort of both good and bad at the same time, because you know, like to contain multitude is to be complex and human. And these are ultimately the stories that I think we want to be seeing, because they do reflect the like infinite variety of lived experiences of other communities.
Yeah, no, you raise a really good point. You know, like you don't just, you know, I'm old enough to remember the last gasps of kind of the monolithic culture that truly existed for way too long and like well into the 90s. But we are seeing, you know, a break from that, right? There are, especially due to, you know, social media and the interconnectedness of people because of the internet, there are a lot more markets, right? It's not just you need to sell something to Americans, end of subject. Like it's you know, there are this many, you know, different venues for people to go out and seek out the you know, the culture or the content, the media that they want. Do you, obviously, I think this is probably a double-edged sword, but do you think, or have you seen any shift in, you know, yes, there's more outlets or more venues for, you know, to share this kind of content, but it also makes it maybe a little bit harder to get a wider audience because you're kind of, you're trying to explore and widen those audiences?
Yes, but I think it's definitely exactly described a double-edged sword, because on one hand there are way more outlets, way more places that you can sell projects to. So theoretically, there should be more opportunity to tell extremely specific individualistic stories. But at the same time, it does also make it harder to stand out. So you do see another shift that comes where you have these giant companies that need something to attach to. They need IP, they need a big movie star, they need a big name. And so it is an interesting dynamic where you both have the sense of, well, you have a better chance of selling your hyper-specific story, but also there's a lot of hunger for some kind of rationality as to how people are going to pick it up the pack.
Yeah, no, I like that. All right, so let's kind of talk, take a step back and we'll talk big picture, because we're getting a lot of questions in the chat regarding you know, kind of the industry as a whole. Now, obviously, nobody's got a crystal ball and y'all can only speak from, you know, what you have seen in your experiences. But what is something that you are incredibly excited to see changing, you know, in the amount of time that you have spent in the industry? Naomi, does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think honestly, you know, before I came to Hillman Grad, I'd worked at a lot of places that were very much in the old studio system. It was a lot of straight white old men ranking straight white old men movies. And by the way, doing some of them really well in ways that I learned a lot about producing and had some wonderful opportunities. But when I was working in those spaces, because they tended to work with others like them, so frequently it felt like that was all that there was to Hollywood, that there wasn't really any other. It was sort of like, figure out how to survive in this, or that's it. Like, you know, this job isn't for you. And it was with a lot of gratitude, honestly, coming over to a place like Hillman Grad, where I realized the opposite is actually kind of true, that there are so many, you know, I think thanks to the work that so many people have done and sort of laying the groundwork and building more of a movement, there really is a foothold for all of us in sort of moving forward. And I think that there's sort of a new hope that I feel personally, and optimism about, like, yes, is it going to be a difficult journey? Absolutely. But I think that it's a much wider world than I thought it was. And there are a lot more people willing to join forces to help move that change. And so that's something that I am really excited to see, is just that continue to push forward.
Well, I like that. And you're right. I mean, it's very, very easy. And a lot of companies fall into it where you end up with a very homogenous group of people because, recommendations do tend to breed people that look like the people already in the room. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it is incredibly important. And it's nice to know that like, yeah, that's the surface level kind of vibe that you get. But like, I do love the fact that there are more of these, more of these pockets of people coming in and becoming very established in the industry who do not fit the mold, who don't want to fit the mold, don't want to keep doing what's already been done. Rishi, how about you? Is there anything that you've seen during your time in the industry that is a really impactful change or something that really excited you?
Yeah, I think from a representation standpoint, it's always really great to see people in front of the camera and see different stories getting represented and actors from different backgrounds getting different roles and that kind of thing. But I personally get really excited when I start to see more people behind the camera and also more people that are, that look like me, that are rising the ranks of studios and networks and production companies and becoming decision makers and becoming the gatekeepers in their own way and opening up those gates. I was actually at I got my start. I was an assistant at a talent agency called UTA, and I started there. And I had a really amazing boss named Dana Spector, who became a really great mentor for me. But at the same time, I was one of a handful of Asian people at the company. It was a vast majority a white workplace, and a few weeks ago, I was invited to an event that was celebrating Brown Hollywood in the courtyard of UTA. And it was this kind of incredibly emotional moment and experience to see the place that I would sort of sit outside at lunch as an assistant and, eat my sad desk salad and see that area filled with brown people was a very, very cool experience. And I'm starting to see that a lot more. And I'm starting to see what a lot of the organizations like CAPE and Gold House and the Salon, all these different kind of groups kind of putting together community for Asian people in Hollywood. It's dope. It's like really cool to see. And I think it's also going to allow storytelling to progress in a way because there's more of us in positions of power. So.
I like that. I absolutely love that. It kind of makes me think of all the times where you like sit at the end of the movie and watch the credits, right? And it's a lot of pretty white sounding names, especially early on. But it's really gratifying to get to see that like A, so many people work on these projects, but B, like you're right, you need to see that visibility is not just in the spotlight. Right. It becomes, especially in this age that we live in where like, all of the awards shows are televised and it's a big deal and people like treat them like I'm not trying to go, not like a bracket, you know what I mean? Like people are really involved in them. And so it is really great to see that the contributions made to these projects are not just in front of the camera. They're not just, front and center. It's also all of these people and you need to be support it, right? You can't just be the only like Asian actor on set. It's very important to feel safe and feel like you are with other people that support you and see you. It's massive. Let's see, Lacey, how about you? Do you have anything that really stands out to you as like, this is changing or this is on the cusp of changing and I'm so excited about it?
Yeah, I think for me, I have a sort of unique perspective because I didn't come with any big dreams of being in entertainment. I actually started my career in politics and activism. And it took me a moment to kind of realize that I think policy change doesn't happen without cultural change and the influence that really entertainment has on all of the issues that we were fighting for with sexual violence, racial justice, all of these things. And so for me, I think that's what's been really beautiful to see is a sort of greater understanding of the impact that the content we create will have on the real world. It's not just art and fun and entertainment, but it actually has these really direct impacts on people's lives and how we're viewed, and especially as Asian Americans who sometimes feel so invisible. To see our own, faces and stories up on those screens makes a huge difference. I think sometimes more than anything I could have ever achieved in DC or in politics. And maybe that's just my way of telling me I made the right career moves.
Probably, yes. Oh my gosh. Like,
We'd be lost without you, so we're grateful.
excellent. Oh no, I think that's absolutely wonderful. Now, okay, we have about 15 minutes left. So if y'all have questions for the Hillman Grad team, please put them into the chat. We'll be going back and checking. So hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that anybody asks. But make sure you send them in as soon as possible. That way you have a better chance of it getting asked before we run out of time today. Okay, I have a question that occurred to me while we were sitting here chatting, because I was not aware that that the Hillman Grad org is geared towards not only, you know, historically like marginalized and underrepresented groups, but also people with memberships in the alphabet mafia. So when it comes to, you know, that kind of representation of like the LGBTQIA+ experience, which is just incredibly different from person to person, there's no other way to put it. How are y'all trying to work with creators as well as people that are creating content around this group? Because like, I remember back to trying to think in like what late 90s, like Will and Grace was like the only show on TV that was talking about what it was like to be a person who lives in the world who is also gay. And I mean, I love the show, loved it. It was lovely. But like, you go back and look at it now and you're like, that wouldn't really work for what we're doing now. But then you see, you know, like shows like The L Word came along in there. Then there was Queer as Folk. Like there's been a lot of like kind of changing, not necessarily just like stereotypes or just like character arcs for these types of characters. But does that you know, present an extra layer into the kinds of stories that y'all are trying to get told? You know, has that really changed, at least from what you're seeing going forward? Travis, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. It's sort of similar to the sort of long spiel that I gave too, where it's like, you know, a lot of these sort of LGBTQ stories were about coming out, right? They're about sort of this coming out and focusing on a certain difference. And I think that the stories that we want to be telling are very much reflecting the infinite variety of stories within the LGBT community, and those are so much more interesting and specific and individual than people are aware of, but also because there's no reason why we shouldn't be telling stories, right? In the same way, you have so many other communities that feel as though their stories can't be told because they're either boxed out of the system or because they were told only one specific type of character can represent them in a similar way. That's not true. We can have a spectrum and freedom to express characters the way they are, which is very human and flawed and exceptional and amazing, but also shitty, but also, you know, anything that contains both the contradictory notions that every human is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think back to examples that I've seen. I mean, there's like the entire relationship arc with David on Schitt's Creek. Like I can't tell you how many times I was like, oh my God, I've been there before. And I'm a cisgender heterosexual like woman. I have not, you know, navigated the minefield of this is my new boyfriend. And also he was going to get married to a woman like this. Sorry, y'all, if there's spoilers, but you know, sorry. I mean, I think it's been long enough, but I am also still saving 3 episodes of that last season for like a really bad day because I'm just not ready for it to be over yet. And like, I know what happens, but like, I'm not ready. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm terrible. But you know what I mean? Like it really does show how universal these stories can be when they're specific, when they are situational. And it's, you know, it's also like Travis, you were saying, you know, it's kind of a change in how these stories are told, because it's no longer, okay, I'm gay and we have to make this a thing that we talk about and it has to be a huge part because otherwise people aren't going to get it. And then it moves more into, no, we're people in the world. This is what we do. We live same as you do. And, you know, for a lot of America, it's very important to show that because not everywhere has representation around people. All right. So Lacey, your word about politics kind of pinged this in my head here. I want to talk about how the AAPI grassroots movements and advocacy really tie into the work that y'all are doing at Hillman Grad. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't think it needs to be said, the last few years have been incredibly hard for the Asian American community. And, you know, a study came out a few weeks ago that belief that Asian Americans caused COVID and this was all our fault has actually increased in the past 2 years, not decreased, despite everything that's happened. And it's also been a year of just a lot of violence and a lot of organizing that has come out of that. Like me personally, I had a woman who drove a car into my event and chased me down and screamed at me to get out. And that's a small story. I have friends who have faced so much worse. And so I think in this moment, it took a lot of time for sort of mainstream outlets to really start talking about Asian American violence. And it was that moment of us feeling really invisible in such a traumatic time. But I think that's also the core of how art has brought us all together. Like in this time is when everyone was able to find part of themselves in minor feelings, talking about what is the minor feelings that we haven't expressed. I've had full crying sessions at Turning Red multiple times. I have makeup.
That's on deck for this weekend. It's my movie date with my husband on Friday. We're adults.
You're gonna
Don't worry
cry
about it. But I'm so excited.
Cry. But it's also not just like this important part of finding ourselves in it, but also to find something that validates the emotions that we've been feeling, and also to validate ourselves. You know, I worked on a mural with an amazing Chinese American street artist that was a Protect Your Elders mural with really, you know, deep Asian American and Asian sort of motifs in it. And hundreds of people came out. And so the way that this art creates the community and space of gathering, so even in this time where maybe other people weren't recognizing us, for us to sort of recognize ourselves is so important. That is why we champion the art that we do. And even again, like in the lab that we have, yes, you know, it's a chance for us to teach us these tangible skills of like how to make it in the industry. But it's also meant to be a microcosm of the industry, the type of industry that should exist. Even though we know when they graduate, it's probably not the one that they're going to have. We want to give them that space for them to authentically create art that's authentic and honest to themselves, and however that looks like, not to what a studio wants. And that space is the most powerful thing.
Yes, 100%. All right, so that leads us nicely into the last question that I wanted to ask y'all before we have to say goodbye today. What to you, obviously, you know, because you can't speak for everybody, what to you does accurate and abundant AAPI representation in entertainment look like? I feel like we've hit on like little parts of this all throughout, but Naomi, what does it look like to you?
I think it's like, it's always starting from a place of like, is this just like a real person? You know, I think it's, you know, it's just to go back to what Rishi was talking about earlier, it's wanting to see, I mean, that's what's most important about representation, is helping people see each other as human beings, right? And that can mean a lot of different things. I think it's the authenticity, it's flaws as well as virtues. It's you know, hopefully with more and more of us being seen out there, it's also like a spectrum of getting to point to so many different, like even your question at the beginning, like, you know, who's your favorite API character? I think there was a time where we would have had like, you know, 2 options, 3 options max. And so it's all of those things. And I think it comes with empowering the people who know what they're talking about to be able to talk about it. And that's something that we take super personally, and that the people we work with take super personally. And, you know, that's where it starts.
All right, Rishi, how about you? What does that authentic and abundant representation look like?
I don't know that there's too much more that I could say either, but I mean, give me the messy characters, give me the non-minority characters, give me the artists, give me the people that are pursuing things that are being doctors and engineers, give me stories that are not arranged marriage stories, give me stories that are not coming out stories, give me stories that are representative of the world that exists all around us. And that to me is, it's everything and it's key, and we're not going to be fully represented in Hollywood until we have that.
Yes. Oh, loving this. All right, Travis, how about you? What do you think that abundant representation looks like? And I feel like that's important because, you know, like you can have accurate representation, but there might not be nearly enough of it. So what do you think that looks like ideally for you?
There was a really great profile in the Times when, the New York Times, when Minari came out, of Stephen Yun, by the writer Jason Caspian Kang, and he has this amazing quote from Stephen Yun, and it's something like, it's like, sometimes I wonder if the Asian American experience is what it's like when you're thinking about everyone else and nobody is thinking about you. And in many ways, like, that kind of sentiment is Asian Americans on the periphery of things, but not being able to participate in them. And so I think abundance means that Asian Americans are able to participate and be a part of every American experience as anybody else, but obviously with the specific lens of the heritage. But I think oftentimes what it feels like is being on the periphery and observing is very different from participating and having direct action in these stories.
Oh yeah, completely. Lacey, close us out on this. What do you think that accurate and abundant representation should look like?
You know, for me, when Crazy Rich Asians came out, which is a movie that I love, everyone talked about the fact that this is the first time with an all Asian cast since Joy Luck Club. It's been 20 something, 25, 30 years since that had happened, and how we'd been missing from the picture since. And that was such a lie to me, because it's not like Asian American creatives stopped working for 30 years and no one was creating anything, just no one was giving us the due. And we were creating great art all the way through. So for me, it's an acknowledgement of the creativity in our community that's constantly happening, not just when someone else decides to recognize it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so important. Because you're right. Like, you do have these sort of flagship things that come out, and it's wonderful, right? It's great. I love it when something has that mass appeal and it reaches so many people, especially when it has such a great story behind it. You know, it tells such an amazing narrative. But you're right. Like, people don't just stop working. I mean, what was it? Was it Memoirs of a Geisha? Got all kinds of like, yeah, we got all kinds of press. It was great. I love the movie, but you know, they were casting Asian people. They weren't casting people that would have ethnically been from that region, because, you know, to most mainstream white audiences, they can't tell the difference. And that was fine for the time, but it's not. So I love this idea of, like, you know, it doesn't need to be the most groundbreaking thing. It doesn't need to set records. It doesn't need to be only Asians involved in it. You should still talk about it. Like, it's a big deal to see that these things keep happening so that more of them can keep happening. In the last 3 minutes that we have, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for being on this panel today, taking an hour out of your day to spend with us, bringing your own lived experience and vulnerability to the table here. It's incredibly appreciated. We had a lot of people asking about, like, how to get involved with your program, how to apply, that kind of stuff. Can anybody give us like a high level, like, here's what you need to do, here's where you can go to get info, that kind of thing?
Lacey.
You go to the website and sign up for the newsletter. You'll get a ping when our applications open for our mentorship lab and our director's program, Rising Voices, which will be later this fall.
Yes. If any of y'all want to send that link in the Zoom chat, I can put it over onto our website as well. So that way everybody can get that in the chat on the site. All right, so we have just about run out of time for the day, but the one thing that I do want to ask, just quick, like, popcorn before we close out here today. What is one thing or one, like, project, you know, a piece of media, anything that you think everybody should know about, but nobody's talking about, or not enough people are talking about? Rishi, you got one?
Oh man. I feel like everyone is talking about everything everywhere all at once, but more people should be talking about it, because it's such
Hey, I hadn't heard of it. I'm looking it up right now.
All right, there you go. Everything Everywhere All at Once, filmed by the Daniels. I've seen it a couple of times now. It really rocked me, but also is such a kind of cool, nuanced, everything we're talking about, different take on an Asian family.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. Naomi, how about you? You got anything come to mind for you?
That's a hard question. I mean, I honestly, something that really amazed and moved me was the Netflix show Kiri Haji. Just because it was one of the first time I'd sort of seen this, like, cross-cultural, international, Eastern, Western melding of stories in a way that felt like it was actually giving each half its due, and also getting to represent, in the process of merging those worlds, a variety of characters who lived in, you know, it's like whether you're first gen or you are born and raised in an Asian country, whether you're an immigrant, you know, all these sort of different ways of identifying as Asian or of Asian descent. And that also spoke in some ways to the diaspora as a result, even though it was really about, you know, this big thriller chase sort of murder mystery sweeping story at the same time. So that's one I love, and I hope more people sort of look to as they think about other ways that we can keep expanding the way Asian stories are told.
Love it. All right, our recording is going to get cut away, or our live stream is going to get cut away because we're showing a recording next. However, I don't want to forget about Lacey or Travis. So if y'all have suggestions of something people should check out, send it to me in the Zoom chat, and then we will put it up on the website. But that is going to close this session out. Thank you all so much. This has been truly wonderful. I really, really appreciate it.